Good evening. Normally it's morning when we talk, but I happen to be working the evening shift and there's no one here right now. So I thought I would take a few minutes and smoke a cigar with you and tell you a story. So I'm smoking my Habano. Well, I've already taken the wrapper off. The Habano, which has the blue band. This is my medium cigar. It is Dominican filler binder and has the Ecuadorian wrapper. And so I thought I would demonstrate for you a Cuban cut. Now, some people love a Cuban cut, and I showed you one time the V cut that I do. That's my favorite. And a Cuban cut is a slanted cut. So you're just gonna cut very much here and slant a little bit. So let me see if I can do that for you so you can see it. So you see the tip is flat. And there you can see now it's a little bit of a slant. So Cuban cut. And I'm going to try to light it correctly, not be in a rush just because somebody's watching. So I'm going to just lightly toast it. It's very hard to be patient. And can you see I'm just making it rosy there at the end? But I'm not letting the fire touch it too much. A little bit more. Some people like the Cuban cut because it gives you much more of the flavor of the tobacco. Now here's what I do that I hope serious cigar people aren't watching this, because I am going to flip it upside down. If I do a Cuban cut, and there are a couple of cigars that the Cuban cut to me is best on, but I will turn it upside down. I don't want that on my tongue. I want this longer part there. Today I wanted to tell you about my worst day in New York. This was in 2016, and there were some friends in Manhattan who I got acquainted with due to my son and his wife. And they were going to be gone and asked me if I wanted to come and stay in their apartment while they were gone. They lived on the Upper East Side, very nice part of Manhattan. And that gave my son and his wife some time alone. It's difficult to have someone in your house. And it gave me some time alone. So I packed up a few things and went and stayed there, and which required me to get up earlier in the morning than I normally did to get to the Starbucks in the corner of Smith and Wyckoff to start my shift at 5. So I got up early, I'm getting ready, and I had several blocks to walk to get to Lexington, the Lexington 53rd subway stop, I think it was. And anytime you're walking in the city in the middle of the night, to me, I'm on guard. I'm watching because, it can be a little dicey. Even though I was in a very nice part, I still was on guard with every step. So right before I get to the subway station, I'm in the middle of a block. I've still got to finish that block, cross the street, get onto the next block, and then the subway station is going to be there on my left. So I'm walking along, and when I get in the middle of that block, I can hear shouting. There was hardly any traffic. This was right before 4 o'clock in the morning. And as I get to the middle of the block, I can kind of see, and just around the corner were 4 guys. They were standing oddly. They were standing 2 men squared off facing 2 men. It was like a square. And the man with his back to me and on this side was screaming with rage. And he said the same 2 sentences over and over and over. And so for my friends who don't like language, you might not want to listen to this story because I'm going to tell you the New York language that was being said. And he was screaming, "I'm a New Yorker, that's Manhattan shit." And he screamed it over and over, and I kind of stopped. Now, they each had bandanas folded, wrapped around their hands, their colors, if you will, for what gang they were a member of. The 2 guys with their backs to me had one color. The 2 guys facing them had another color. So I figured this was 2 gangs meeting up, having a meeting, and it wasn't going well. And so as I paused and looked over there at them, the 2 guys facing me noticed me, and they pivoted, and they each went different directions, turned and went the other way. Well, this alerted the guy who was not screaming, but had his back to me. He looked over his shoulder, saw me, he pivoted and went that way, all 3 different directions. This left the man screaming. And he turned and he saw me. Never stopped screaming his 2 sentences, never lowered the volume, never changed the amount of rage that I could hear, and he comes towards me. And when he gets close to me, he's up over me, screaming at me. These same 2 sentences, never changed. I was scared. Very, very scared. And this was the only day in New York where I was sure I probably wasn't going to finish the day. I didn't know what to do. And I kind of turned, and he kind of turned with me. So now his back is to the street, and I'm turned towards facing the street and him, and he doesn't quit. He doesn't move. I mean, he's there, right there with me. And I had to get to work. And I didn't know what to do. One, I figured I represented a lot of things in life that he didn't like. 2, I didn't want to look him in the eyes and try to shout him down, get away. I didn't want to become a New Yorker in that moment. I'm sorry, but you know, you just scream back. I didn't want to do that. I figured we had enough rage in this situation. And so I did lift up my head a little bit, and I was like, you know, I got to get to work. I can't just stand here and wait and go, what's going to happen to poor little me in this bad situation? And so I finally raised my head and just looked at his face and just quietly said, "Would you please move back a few steps?" Didn't faze him. Same 2 sentences, same amount of rage, and he just kept screaming. And so I tried again. And I said, "I'm asking you, would you step back a few steps?" And he did. Now, for me to go on to finish the block, cross the street, get to the subway station, I was going to have to turn my back to him, at least my side to him, and walk. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that even if he wasn't packing a gun under his loosely fit hoodie, he had a knife. And I knew that if it wasn't going to be shot, I was going to be knifed in the back. And I figured it wasn't going to go well for me. And so I just, as is my habit, I just said, "Please God, let it be quick. Just let it be quick." And it took every ounce of courage I had, and I turned away from him and turned to go down the sidewalk. He didn't pull out a weapon. He didn't touch me. Instead, he started walking along beside me, still screaming the same 2 sentences with the same amount of rage. So now there's 2 of us going to the subway. And I walk slowly, finishing the block. I'm crossing the street. And as I'm crossing the street, I notice that on my left, there is a pickup truck backing up one of those little food trucks to get ready for the New York morning. And when I get past that and step onto the sidewalk, I can see to my left on the other side of the truck is the gentleman directing the truck, backing up the food truck. He's an older gentleman. I can tell that he's not a native-born New Yorker, but I decided I needed help. Because this is a subway stop that you go down an escalator, you go down another escalator, I don't remember if it was 3, but I knew that I was going to be going down into this labyrinth of a subway station, and if this guy followed me, it wasn't going to go well. So I kind of turned to the left, took a couple of steps, and I'm guessing they weren't paying much attention to these guys. This is normal New York stuff. And I didn't know if he would help me, but I decided to ask. And I took a couple of steps and I said, "Would you please help me?" And this gentleman just stared at me, not in a rude way, just looked at me. And I decided that I was scared enough that I was going to take a couple more steps and ask again. And so I did. And by this time, I was quite emotional. And I said, "I am very scared. Would you please help me?" And the whole time, this guy is still screaming the same 2 sentences with the same amount of rage, waving his arms. And this gentleman looked at me and he said, "You go Subway?" And I said, "Yes." And he immediately started walking. He got in between me and the man, and now we are 3 of us going to the Subway. We get back to the corner, we turn, and as we get close to the escalator, I looked at my protector and I said, "Please don't let him follow me." The guy is probably 8 feet away now, but still turned towards me, still screaming, waving his arms. And my protector looked at me and he said, "You go, I stay." And so I walked towards the escalator, and this gentleman came, turned his back to the escalator, took a stance with his legs spread a little bit apart, crossed his hands in front of him, and stood facing the man still screaming. And I turned and went down the escalator. I couldn't believe that I was not hurt, that I was able to go down and wait for the train. I was still shaking. I was still scared. But I made it. I don't know what happened after that. But the next time I got to go stay in this apartment, and I got to go another time, I made the same route, the same time of morning. The same pickup truck was backing up the food truck. And when I stepped up on the sidewalk, sure enough, the same guy was there directing the truck. It had been a few months. I didn't know if he would remember me. But I walked up to him and I said, "I'm not for sure you remember me. But one morning I needed help and you protected me. And I wanted to say thank you." He didn't say a word. He just looked at me and he nodded. And I knew he remembered. And I went and got on the subway and went to work. You know, there's lots of times in life you find yourself in situations that you didn't expect. Sometimes you find yourself in situations and you find out there's a bully, and maybe it wasn't directed you, but you find out it is. You don't know what to do. Maybe you say, ask for relief, and you think you've got it, but then it follows you. You can't get away from it. And then I think it's time to ask for help. I was surprised this gentleman helped me, to be honest, because a lot of times in New York, stuff like this happens and people don't want to get involved. They don't want to be involved at all. I was very blessed, fortunate, that this gentleman, even though we didn't have much in common, but we're 2 hearts beating on the sidewalk of New York, that he stepped up and helped me. And I loved his words of, "You go, I stay." And he was willing to face the danger for me to be safe. I don't know exactly what those four guys were doing, what was going on. All I can tell you is that man never stopped screaming the same two sentences. I'm very glad I survived the day. And I hope that whatever you've got going on in life or whatever's happening, if you've got a bully in your life, and I figure we all have bullies of some kind, sometimes bullies can be quite charming, but you still feel the blows. Sometimes they're quite vicious. Sometimes they're people very close to you. Sometimes you grow up with them. Sometimes you encounter them later in life. Whatever the situation may be, I want you to know, utter some words of letting them know, and if that doesn't work, ask for help. You may have to ask more than once, but keep asking. You know, normally when I do these stories, I will tell you, I don't ever want you to forget, always look to the light. But it happens to be dark now. It's not light outside at all. So what do you do when it's dark? And there's no light outside. You keep looking. You keep looking. And you know, sometimes you're going to find that there is a little light somewhere. I love little lights. Little lights remind me in the darkness that there's always light somewhere. So keep looking. Keep looking. And know that I'm the lady with the cigar, and I'm sending love.